Welcome to Lou's Lab. Today we're going to be talking about the Pan OS 8.1. We're just going to do a quick overview of highlight of some of the different functions in each tab. So we have 7 tabs. We have the dashboard, the ACC, monitor, policy, objects, network, and device. I'm going to just kind of go through a couple different things that you should know. Some just general over knowledge of these things, of what these tabs offer you. So a quick note in the dashboard, you can see here you have your widgets. You can set up, you have application style, system information, logs. You can set it up how you want the window pane to be 2, 3 deep. So this is by default. This is the default setting here. Here you can see your commits, who's currently logged in, how hard is the machine working, how many sessions it has, your risk level of your traffic in the last 60 minutes. So again, by default, this is set to refresh every 5 minutes. You can change that for 1 minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes in manual. If you want to refresh, you just click that button, quick refresh. So down here on the task, here just shows you what you got going on. So this gives you like an example if you're applying a patch, downloading a patch, it'll show you the progress that's in there. Then you have the ACC, which here this gives you a quick little overview of your traffic flow. So you can see here's my Sophos is being updated, got a couple pings going on, shows you the traffic by default. The last hour, you can get granular with filters. So here you can set up particular addresses, applications, data types, files, interfaces, rules, threats, so on and so on. Here, it's going to show you your quick statistics. It's going to give you your maps. So it's kind of nice. So if you need to do some fancy reports, you know, this is a quick way. If you just want to get a quick screenshot of showing something, you can do all that. And this may or may not populate based on what functionality of the Palo Alto. Since the Palo Alto is 7 layers, you have the threat, you have URL filtering, you have antivirus, you have all those things enabled, turned on, enabled for logging. So this information may vary in how much you're going to see based on how much that stuff you have enabled. Like, do you have the user enabling where you're capturing the users who's going through your network? So like by default, I don't have that set up. So I'm not going to see that information by user activity. It's going to be blank. And then same thing with threats. Right now, I don't really have anything in here because I don't have the threats configured, so there's no data. That's why it's not going to show. But I just wanted to give you a quick rundown as we go through more videos of enabling more features. Eventually, this will all be filled up. So again, the monitoring tab is what I like to see is like it's a quick snapshot at a particular time what's going on. And then we have the monitor tab. This is where we're monitoring an example. Like here by default we're on the URLs from the last time I was logged in. This is what I call near time. It's not real time because it's near time when you clicked on that log option, because right now it's set for manual. So if I want to see it again, I have to hit refresh, change my times. So a quick little note in here too, you can sort traffic out. So let's say, hey, I want to see who's all going to this. You can click on these different things here, and then we can do a search. So now we can do a search, and let's just say this device went to this IP. So if we had multiple things, and then we can additionally add on top of that. So we can go and click the add filter, and then we can say and or. Is it this or that? And then again, we can do all these different attributes. So let's say if we were looking for a particular URL, you can do an exact match. I like to use contain just in case if it's not, if the URL is a little longer, it won't match. So that's why I like to just do the basics. So we can go in here. So like an example, I'll put ring. So I have a Ring doorbell. I'm sure it's, and then we can hit add and then apply. And then we're going to click run because this is our search query. Okay, so that IP address did not go to ring.com. So now if we go in there and highlight that out and then hit enter or hit the little bar, here you can see here's all the different things that went to a URL with ring. And then again, we can narrow it down. We can go in there. We can leave both. We want to change that to an or. And then here we can just hit enter or click on the apply filter rule. And now there's my doorbell phoning in the ring, letting it know, hey, I'm still alive. So again, you can do that with your traffic, your different stuff here as you have it configured correctly. So like botnets, browsing, searching. So you can go in there and see your status of browsing, botnets. So if I had the threat protection configured in here, and if my machine was doing, if I had some machines doing a bunch of DNS queries that are thinking that, hey, maybe it's trying to phone home, it would show up in here. Right now I don't have the threat configuration, so it's not going to show anything in here. And then here we can also manage, our different reports. We can create reports, things like that, which we'll get into later in here. But I just want to highlight the main things. And also, since we got the URL, one of the other things we can do here, we can export this to a CSV. So a CSV is essentially just a comma, then delimited file. So here we have it. You can commonly open it up in Excel, and then from there it's essentially an Excel version of the screen. There's my cell phones telling me, hey, I'm protected. And then from here we can go in Excel and manipulate this data if we needed, for some reason we needed this information. We can then trim it down, create a report out of it if we needed it, or whatever reason we need it, or maybe we need this for proof that this computer is not supposed to go to ring.com, and we want to save it for later for offline because device is not going to store it forever. So that's quick little features, and this works in the same in all these categories here in the search. You can essentially add a filter. You can save a filter. So let's say you're searching for the same things on and off. You can do that, or you don't want to see a site. So let's say we don't want to see a site that contains ring, and then we can put a negative in there. So maybe we have a lot of noise of a particular site or a particular app that causes too much noise. We can just select it, make it a negative, and say so no one show up in our event log, so we don't see it. So it helps clean up what you're looking at. So I have a couple different ones for when I'm doing some work. So we have policies. So we have our security policy, our NAT policy, our QoS policies, our decryption policy, our policy-based forwarding. That's an interesting one. So if you have normal, if it looks at the traffic and it normally goes this way, but for some reason you want to manipulate to go another way, that's what policy-based forwarding is for. And again, they're all very similar. You got rule names, tags, zones, what zone is it going to, interfaces, things like that. Uh, so like an example in the security, here's the rule that we made in the tap. We can go in here, and one of the other things down here I want to share with you guys, you can go down here and you can hit highlight, and it'll show you, like right now, this is the only rule that, since I've had this up and running, has not been used yet. So out of the 3 rules, because 2 and 3 are the default rules that are in the firewall, I've not had any traffic that hit option or rule number 3 yet. So that's a quick way of knowing, hey, am I hitting any rules? And then you can set your rule set counter. So if you want to say, okay, I cleaned up my rules, I made some modifications, let's see if traffic goes by, are we hitting all the rules? Are we using these rules? Then we're going to hit objects. So objects, there's quite a bit in here. This also, the objects deal with a lot with the policies. They go hand in hand. So like an example, we're going to create addresses. So if we want to make web servers, let's say we're dealing with a DMZ and we have all our devices in the DMZ, we're going to put all those devices in here, and then we're going to group them together by services. So let's say here's all our web servers, here's all our SQL servers, and here's all these and these. We can group them so that way when we go back to the policy, we can use those rules. And then again, we can set up regions. So like an example, you have addresses you're detecting problems with, same thing. And then here is your app IDs. So if you're not sure what this particular app ID does, you can click on it and it gives you a quick rundown. And you can go services. This is where we go back to the old school with ports. So if we're going to use ports to do something, we would do it here. And then just going to hit over security policy. So by default, there is a default policy in each one of these categories. So here's the one that we made earlier, the tap. File blocking, so we can do some basic file blocking. We can do some defining. Maybe we have rules we don't want certain objects to be downloaded. We can, apply those types of rules. And again, this all depends on licensing. So if you don't have threat protection, you're not going to have antivirus. You're not going to have vulnerability. If you don't have URL, you're not going to have these things. So if you're not sure if you have these things, so the best way to do is go right to device, go right down to your license, and here you're going to see what licenses you have. This is a lab bundle, so I have all the licensing. And then under device tab, since we're kind of jumped around a little bit, some of the important parts, here's licensing. This tells you when it all expires. And then we have dynamic updates. So based on your licensing, these are the different updates you're going to have. So you're going to have Global Protect, you're going to have Wildfire, Threats, and Applications. So if you didn't have threat protection, you still would get an app ID because that populates. And one of the nice features that I like about this, here, if you want to know what these release notes, you can click on the release notes, and then it's going to give you a quick blurb of what's in that update. So here you can see here's their particular threat notes, here's new app IDs, here's modified ones, here's modified service decoders, and new signatures. Nice. And since these are dynamic updates, you can apply these. These won't cause downtime. Nice feature. You can schedule it where it will download it, it'll install it. You can do it daily, however you like to do that. And then here you would set up your client. So You would prefetch your client if you have the appropriate license, and then software. So also you want to do is click check now, and then that'll go out to Palo Alto and check to see if there's any new updates. So I just recently updated this, so there's no need to. Again, you can click our release notes. We can roll back. So if we need to reinstall this, maybe there's an issue, we can hit reinstall, we can roll back. Can't roll much further back because this is an 8.1. We started that way, so there's nowhere else to roll back to. And then some of the other important areas here in setup. This is where you're going to put some of your important information, your general settings here. So what time zone you're in, language, if you're going to do geolocations, things like that. If you have a panorama, you're going to enable that so the panorama can push data. That's Palo Alto's central management software that allows you to manage multiple firewalls through one pane of glass. You can set up your secure communications, your banner. So if you have a login banner, which should be an appropriate thing to do. Again, how are we allocating logging? So in this particular, here's the defaults on everything. So like when we were talking about exporting stuff from the monitor tab, that's how many rows of data it's going to put out. It's talking about here's how much storage, here's how much is allocated, here's how everything is going to stay. And then again, we have a password policy. And then if you have licensing for autofocus, things like that. Operations. Here's another good important tab here. So we can revert back to configurations. So let's say we made a mistake. We can just go back straight to the last one. We can save a configuration. We can make a snapshot. So we can say, hey, this is a good one or a candidate. We can load one. We can export one if we want it. We can import. So maybe if this is our test bed and we're making a test, we can export the config, put in our other device, and export and import. Kind of nice on that aspect. Here's where we can shut the appliance down, reboot the device if we need to. This is the graceful way because there is not an on and off switch. There's no shutdown button on the device itself. So this is how you want to shut it down gracefully. You would go right in there, click on it, and it would shut down. Other good important things in the device tab. Your service. This is where it's going to get its update. Updates.Palo Alto. What it's going to use, what DNS server you're going to use. If you have time server set up, this is where it's going to get its time. Again, this is all stuff that I haven't set up in an initial video. The initial video I just showed is just the basics, like how do I got the box, I logged into it, just getting it updated, and now we're in the process of configuring. So these would be the fine tweaks I'd go in there. Next would be setting up my DNS, my DHCP, or setting up my DNS and my time servers, because that's important to keep that all synced. And then here's our management interface. This is where you're going to log. This is the interface that you have for the Palo Alto. So it has its own dedicated interface that you want to do. So here, an example for those who are competing in the CCD, here's some important little tips here on how to protect your Palo Alto. Is going in here and enabling or disenabling these features. So you want to go in there, maybe you want to set up SNTP user ID. So you want to make sure who's logging in besides putting the password in there. So you can say, oh, well, this person logged in using this password because now I have the date and time stamped in here. Also, a very important thing, what network address do you want to allow people to log in? So you can lock it down to an individual IP, always use the description. So this way you go back later and you say, what's this IP there for? Maybe that's for so-and-so's computer. Maybe they're no longer here. So you have the description, you know that, oh, I should get rid of that. Because later down the line, you're going to forget, and that's why it's important to do that. And then again, mine is set for DHCP. You may, in the real world, you may want to set it up that it's static. Mine's in a little test lab, so it's not a big deal to me being DHCP. But again, if you want to tie your name to an IP, you need a static, so that way every time, so that way your DNS, you're not constantly changing your DNS. And then you have some other tabs here. So here you can set up your reports, your telemetry. Again, you can set up your URL filtering here. Here's your dynamic URLs. You can do some additional URL admin overwrites. So here's where you make some more custom changes. Again, if you have the proper licensing, you can turn this on. And then here, setting up how your sessions are handled, your TCP is being handled, how you're doing SSL decryption, how you're handling your VPNs, your basic settings there, your session timeouts. And then if you have a physical hardware box, you can set up, your hardware module protection. And then high availability, or we call commonly known as HA. So that means if you're doing an active passive or active environment, you need some additional interfaces. So when we looked in the interface tab previously, that's where you would go in there and designate those interfaces depending on which firewall you have. You may already have those dedicated interfaces for that. And then your password policy, you can set up a password policy. Here's your additional user counts. Again, if you're competing in the CCD, this would be a good spot to check to make sure how many user accounts you have. Do you need them? What's going on with them? Things like that. And then going to the network here, again, this is how the Palo Alto works. We use zones, so we assign interfaces to what they are, because this is, a layer 7 device. So here you can see a quick snapshot. Here's the interfaces. So right now I only have interface 1 set up. It's in a TAP environment. It does not have a management profile. Can make one. Since it's a TAP, it's not going to have an IP address. It's not associated to a router. So we can make this into multiple things. So like an example, I could take, port 2 and 3, make that inline, so that would be a virtual vWire. I could take 4, 5, and 6 and make them into a virtual router, and then I could take 7, 8, and 9 and make it into a switch if I wanted to. So we can carve this up into multiple functions. We can have multiple taps if we needed to. Again, we can make it inline, so we can make it an IDS, an IPS. Right now, this is configured essentially as an IDS because it's a tap mode. It only detects, it doesn't prevent. So here, you can see what zones they're in. Again, it's good to put comments in there, because as you configure this and use more of the interfaces up to do multiple things, it makes sense to do that. So, and again, we can go here, we have zones. This is where we do the policy settings. We go from one zone to the other. That's how we make our rules. The other thing, zones also include user ID. So that is where we talked about in the monitor tab in the ACC. If we want to find users, we have to enable that in this section, in the zone. If we don't define that user information in the zone, we can't collect that or require people to authenticate depending on how we want to use this. So again, VLANs, very simple. We just make VLANs. B-wires, again, just be taking two interfaces, linking them up together as a layer 1 type device. A virtual router, because we can have multiple routers in here on the same box, which is pretty awesome. Again, we can set up our own DHCP. We can set up a DHCP relay if we need to. We can do a DNS proxy if we need to set something up. And again, some of these features is based on having the appropriate licenses. So like Global Protect, if you don't have the Global Protect licensing, there's not much you can do there. And then we're back to the monitor tab. All right, well that includes a quick 50-foot, 100-foot view of the PAN-OS 8.1. Thanks for watching. Bye.